The day her composure finally broke, it happened not with tears or raised voices, but with a pause so heavy it seemed to bend the air around them, and in that pause, Daniel Reeves felt something inside his carefully guarded world crack open, because hopelessness has a texture, and he recognized it instantly even though he had spent his life pretending not to feel it. They were standing in a modest conference room on the 12th floor of a glass building in downtown Seattle, late evening sunlight slanting through the windows, painting long shadows across the table cluttered with folders, coffee cups, and unfinished plans. Outside, the city moved on as it always did, unaware that inside this quiet room, something fragile was unraveling. Laura Bennett stood near the window, her arms folded tightly as if holding herself together. Her voice low and uneven as she admitted she didn't know how much longer she could keep pretending she was okay, and when she finally turned to face him, her eyes searched as not for answers, but for understanding. She wasn't asking him to fix anything, not yet. She was asking to be seen. Daniel had built a reputation as the steady one, the operations director everyone trusted when things went wrong, the man who never panicked, never overshared, never let emotions cloud judgment. That restraint hadn't come from confidence but from necessity, shaped years earlier in a small Nevada town where his parents' volatile marriage taught him that attachment was dangerous and expectations led to disappointment. He learned early that survival meant control, and control meant distance. Laura was the opposite in every way. She arrived at the company 4 years after him with a warmth that felt almost defiant, as if kindness were a choice she made daily rather than a personality trait. She remembered birthdays, noticed when people were struggling, laughed easily, and believed, stubbornly, in the good intentions of others. Over time, Daniel watched that openness cost her. Relationships that promised security dissolved without warning. Friendships faded when she needed them most, and the optimism she once carried so lightly began to weigh on her. She confided in him because he listened without judgment. During late nights troubleshooting logistics and early mornings preparing reports, she told him about the quiet apartment that greeted her each night, about watching life move forward while she felt left behind, about her fear that wanting love so deeply meant something was wrong with her. Daniel responded the only way he knew how, with advice, with perspective, with introductions to people he thought might help, convincing himself that staying practical kept everyone safe. But that evening, as the building emptied and the city lights flickered on, something shifted. Laura's voice faltered as she asked him why he always talked about love as something she needed to search for elsewhere when he was the one who knew her better than anyone, who showed up every time, who already occupied the space she felt was missing. She didn't accuse him. She didn't plead. She simply asked, and in that question, years of unspoken truth surged forward. Daniel felt exposed in a way success had never prepared him for. He realized then that his constancy, his concern, his presence had never been neutral. He had loved her quietly, cautiously, in a way that demanded nothing of him but everything of her. The realization unsettled him more than any crisis he'd managed before. In the days that followed, the air between them grew strained. Daniel withdrew, burying himself in work, telling himself that distance was maturity, that restraint was kindness. Laura apologized for crossing a line she hadn't even known existed, promising to focus on herself, to stop leaning on him. The office returned to its rhythm, meetings resumed, deadlines loomed, but something essential had fractured. Daniel noticed the absence before he admitted it, the way Laura stopped stopping by his office, how her laughter grew quieter, how she no longer looked to him first when something good or bad happened. At night, alone in his apartment overlooking Elliott Bay, he replayed the moment again and again, questioning the beliefs that had shaped his life. If avoiding pain had kept him intact, had it also kept him empty? Laura wrestled with her own reckoning. She questioned why she always waited until she was exhausted before asking for what she needed, why vulnerability felt like failure even though it was the most honest thing she knew. She considered leaving the company, starting somewhere new, anywhere that didn't echo with the memory of a question she wished she could take back. Friends encouraged her to protect herself, to stop hoping for someone who seemed incapable of choosing her openly. Yet in the quiet hours before sleep, she admitted that loving Daniel had taught her something essential. It had shown her that love wasn't about certainty or guarantees. It was about courage, and courage often arrived long before clarity. The turning point came unexpectedly during a regional project review in a small coastal town in Oregon, where the team gathered to assess a delayed development. A sudden storm cut the power, forcing everyone to wait inside the half-finished structure as rain battered the windows and wind rattled exposed beams. As they sat there, stripped of schedules and distractions, Daniel watched Laura speak with local contractors, offering reassurance, listening with genuine care, finding solutions that balanced empathy with action. In that unguarded moment, clarity pierced his fear. He understood that love wasn't chaos to be controlled but connection to be chosen, and that avoiding it had already cost him years of meaning. When they returned to Seattle, Daniel did something he had never allowed himself before. He asked for time away, stepped out of his routines, and confronted the past he had buried under productivity. He walked the city, revisited places tied to old memories, let himself feel the grief he had long dismissed as weakness. He sought counseling, naming the fears that had governed his choices, learning that strength wasn't found in self-sufficiency but in presence. Growth came unevenly, imperfectly, but honestly. Weeks later, he reached out to Laura not with solutions or promises, but with truth. He acknowledged the fear that had shaped him, the love he had hidden behind helpfulness, and the harm silence had caused. He didn't offer certainty. He offered effort. Laura listened carefully, aware that healing didn't erase hurt overnight. Choosing him meant trusting change, and choosing herself meant honoring her needs. Their path forward wasn't dramatic or idealized. They moved slowly, set boundaries, relearned how to communicate without retreating. Some days were heavy with doubt, others bright with cautious hope. Love revealed itself not in grand gestures but in consistency, in showing up, in choosing honesty when silence felt easier. Daniel learned to lay down his armor, and Laura learned that asking for love was not weakness but bravery. As seasons changed, work continued, the city evolved, and life unfolded in ordinary ways, yet something extraordinary had taken root beneath the surface. A moment of quiet desperation had become the beginning of something neither had planned, shaped not by perfection but by courage. And if this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of a moment you stayed silent or a love you were afraid to claim, know that you are not alone, because sometimes the smallest act of honesty is the greatest kindness we can offer, not just to others, but to ourselves.